She picked up my shattered pieces, looked into my eyes, and said she'd never let anyone hurt me again. But then she was the one who drove the knife in, smiling while I bled. But before the knife, before the blood, before the slow betrayal that unfolded like a beautifully written tragedy, there was her. And there was me. Two broken people standing on the edge of something dangerous, something fragile. Something I mistook for love. My name is Liam, and if you asked me who I was before Arya, I'd probably say I was no one. Because before her, I was invisible. I'd just turned 19 when my life completely lost its shape. My mother died from a prescription overdose. She had been numbing herself for years, living in a fog of half-spoken apologies and blurred memories. I found her on the kitchen floor, pills spilled across the linoleum like broken promises. She was still warm when I held her, still soft, still my mother. Until she wasn't. After that, my father, if you could call him that, collapsed in on himself. He stopped speaking, stopped working, stopped living. The man who had once tucked me in at night now couldn't even look me in the eye. I stayed for a few weeks after the funeral, but the silence was unbearable. Every breath in that house echoed off empty walls and old regrets. So I left. I scraped together what little money I had and moved into a cheap basement flat across town. Mold on the ceiling, no hot water, windows that barely opened. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I worked night shifts unloading delivery trucks at a warehouse, came home when the sun rose, and slept through the days like a ghost. I stopped counting time. I stopped recognizing my reflection. I stopped existing. And then, one day, everything changed. It was raining. The kind of cold, unrelenting rain that soaks through your clothes and into your bones. I was sitting at a rusted bus stop bench, hood up, headphones in, staring at nothing. The world moved past me like a blur. I didn't even notice her at first. Until she spoke. "Hey, are you okay?" I turned, startled. There she was, this girl with wild black hair, soaked to the skin, eyes wide and brown like tree bark after a storm. She had a paper cup of coffee in her hands, and her voice carried something I hadn't heard in a long time. Concern. But not pity. "I'm fine," I lied. She smiled, tilted her head. "Liar." She sat beside me without asking. The bench was wet, and her jeans darkened instantly, but she didn't seem to care. She looked at me like I mattered. Like I wasn't just another ghost with sad eyes. "I'm Arya," she said, extending the coffee to me. I didn't take it. So she placed it beside me on the bench and kept talking. "I come here sometimes. Just to watch people. It's weird, but it makes me feel less alone." We sat there for 15 minutes. I didn't say much. She didn't mind. When her bus came, she stood, gave me a little wave, and walked away. I didn't expect to see her again. But I did. The next day. Then the next. Sometimes she'd bring 2 coffees. Sometimes she'd bring nothing but a story. I slowly started speaking. First a few words. Then a few sentences. Then full conversations. And before I realized it, I was waiting to see her again every day. Her voice became the soundtrack to my mornings. Her laugh became the light in my dark apartment. I found myself breathing again. Not deeply. Not easily. But enough. Eventually, she asked to see where I lived. I was embarrassed. The place was a mess. Torn couch cushions, peeling paint, a kitchen that smelled like cheap soup and loneliness. But she didn't flinch. She walked in like she belonged there. She said it was cozy. I remember one night in particular. We were lying on the floor, backs against the cold wood, staring up at the ceiling through the flicker of candlelight. There was a storm outside, thunder rolling through the sky like an angry god. I turned to her and asked quietly, "Why me? Why are you here?" She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Because I see you. Not the broken parts. Not the shadows. Just you." And then she whispered the words I would carry like a prayer. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." Those words became everything. She started staying over. Leaving a sweater here, a toothbrush there. My apartment began to smell like lavender and coconut shampoo. There was a softness to it now, to me, to us. I smiled more, slept better, laughed sometimes. She had this ritual. After every nightmare I had, she'd place her palm over my heart and whisper, "You're still here. You're still safe." And I'd believe her. God, I believed her. We fell into a rhythm. I started drawing again, sketching old memories, things I had long buried. She said my art was raw and beautiful. She'd kiss my forehead after every piece and tell me I had a soul made of fire. When I cried, she held me. When I broke, she stayed. And slowly, I began to think that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't cursed to live a life of loss. That maybe I was finally healing. But healing is a dangerous thing. It makes you vulnerable. It makes you trust. It makes you forget that even the kindest hands can hold knives, if you let them close enough. It began with little things. Subtle shifts. Glitches in the routine. She started coming home late. Said she was helping her cousin study. Then said it was a friend from art school. Then said nothing at all. I wanted to trust her. I needed to. She'd built herself into the one constant in my life, the only thing that felt solid in a world made of glass. But the glass started cracking. She became distant, even when she smiled. Her laugh felt rehearsed. Her kisses grew shallow, a quick press of lips instead of the soft, lingering way she used to kiss me like she was tasting something sacred. I asked her once, softly, "Is something wrong?" She looked up from her phone, blinked twice, then said, "Why would you think that?" As if the fault was in my asking. As if I was already the problem. I nodded and dropped it. But I started noticing things. A new scent on her clothes, not her usual perfume. Her phone always face down. Text notifications at 2 a.m. Calls she took on the balcony. Her voice low, turned away. One night I followed her. I told myself I wasn't the kind of man who did that, who stalked his girlfriend through city streets like some wounded dog desperate for scraps of truth. But I needed to know. I needed something solid to stand on before the ground gave way beneath me. She got into a car. Not an Uber. Not a cab. A black Audi. Sleek. Familiar. My heart dropped. I knew that car. It belonged to Ethan. My childhood friend. My almost brother. The one person I had let back in my life when Mom died. The one I had cried with, grown with, trusted. The one person I had warned her about. I waited in the rain. Watched them drive off. They went to his apartment. I followed, kept a distance, watched the door close behind them. I waited. An hour. 2. When she finally came out, she looked different. Hair messy. Makeup smudged. Her coat buttoned wrong. Her smile. Lazy, satisfied. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. Instead, I went home. Sat in our shared bed. Stared at the candle she always lit before sleep. The scent of lavender filled the room like a sick joke. When she walked in an hour later, she smiled like nothing had happened. "Miss me?" she asked playfully, shaking off the rain. I nodded. My voice didn't work. She kissed my cheek. And I let her. Because I wasn't ready to know the truth, not yet. The next few days were a blur of pretense. I went through the motions, pretending to believe her stories, pretending to sleep, pretending I wasn't unraveling inside. But I started watching, really watching. She wasn't just lying. She was enjoying it. The way she held her phone tighter when I walked into the room. The smirk she failed to hide when I asked about Ethan. The way she kept me close even as she built a world behind my back. A world I wasn't allowed to see. Then came the breaking point. She left her laptop open. I wish I could say I resisted the urge. That I respected her privacy. That I took the high road. But the truth? I rushed to it. My hands were shaking. And there it was. A folder labeled Art References. Inside, dozens of photos. Not of paintings. Not of landscapes. But of me. Me sleeping. Me crying. Me after a nightmare. Me broken. Each one labeled grief study, subject under emotional stress, collapse in real time, and worse, videos. She had filmed me during breakdowns. I clicked one. It was a clip of me sobbing on the floor after a panic attack. She was behind the camera. I could hear her breathing. I could hear her whispering to herself. Perfect. Raw. This is what they need to see. My blood froze. My vision blurred. She wasn't loving me. She was studying me. Using me. Every soft word. Every held hand. Every whispered promise. It was all research. Material. For her upcoming exhibit. The exhibit, she told me, was about trauma and beauty. She hadn't fallen in love with me. She'd chosen me like a writer chooses a tragedy, because I was damaged enough to be compelling. And Ethan? He wasn't just a betrayal of the body. He was her collaborator. In one of the video files, they were speaking, drunk, laughing. He thinks you love him, Ethan chuckled. And Arya replied, of course he does. That's why it works. I didn't remember falling. I just knew I was on the ground, shaking. I had handed her every scar, and she turned them into a project. She picked up my shattered pieces, looked into my eyes, and said she'd never let anyone hurt me again. But then she was the one who drove the knife in. And she smiled, while I bled. The first thing I did was vomit. Not metaphorically. Physically. Right there, on the floor by the laptop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My stomach curled in on itself as my mind played the video again and again. Her voice echoing like poison through every hollow space inside me. Of course he does. That's why it works. She knew. She knew I was broken. She nurtured the cracks not to heal them, but to deepen them. She sharpened them like weapons. And then she used them. The air in the room thickened, felt like smoke pressing against my lungs. The scent of her still clung to the couch. Her shoes were still by the door. Her sweater, the blue one I always said made her look like winter sunlight, was draped over the chair. I tore it off, hurled it into the corner. My chest heaved like I was drowning. Maybe I was. Because everything inside me was sinking. I didn't speak to her for 2 days. She thought I was sulking. Maybe angry about something small, her lateness, her lies about where she'd been. But she didn't suspect how much I knew. She still smiled at me. Still kissed me in the morning. Still whispered, "You're safe," when she noticed the shadows in my eyes. But those words were weapons now. Every time she said them, it felt like acid on my skin. I became a machine. I moved through each hour with mechanical precision, brushing my teeth, showering, eating, nodding at her when she spoke. But inside, I was gone. Some part of me died when I watched that video. The part that believed love was a sanctuary. The part that believed she could be trusted. The part that believed I mattered. I stopped drawing. My sketchbook stayed shut. I used to create when I hurt, but now I was past pain. I was entering a kind of silence I didn't know existed. A silence with sharp edges. One night, she climbed into bed beside me and placed her hand on my chest. "Still here?" she whispered with a sleepy smile. I stared at the ceiling. "Yes," I said flatly. But I didn't mean I was alive. I meant I was waiting. She curled up beside me and slept like the innocent. I stayed awake and counted the cracks in the ceiling. Each one felt like a fracture in my soul. The next morning, she was humming while making coffee. That same off-key tune she always used to hum when she thought I wasn't listening, like some private soundtrack to her perfect little performance. She kissed my cheek as she handed me a cup. And I smiled. I smiled. Not because I forgave her, but because now, I knew exactly what I had to do. For the next week, I played the role. I became what she needed, the perfect wounded boy, the muse, the hollow-eyed poet clinging to her every word. She thought she still had me wrapped around her finger. She didn't see the way my hands had stopped shaking. She didn't notice the shift in my eyes. I was studying her now. Every movement. Every lie. every route she took, every person she spoke to. I began building a plan the same way she once built her exhibit, carefully, methodically, obsessively. Every time she left, I checked her devices. Every time she came back, I memorized her mood. I wasn't healing. I was preparing. I found everything. The gallery name, the submission paperwork, the press release she never meant for me to read. Fragments of fragility, a real-time study of a partner in grief. That's what she called it. Partner, not man, not love, not Liam. Just subject. She had sold my pain, my cries, my breakdowns, my worst nights. She had edited them into a cinematic narrative. Ethan had help, of course, and a handful of other vultures. Critics, curators, a professor who called it bold and confrontational. She was going to be famous. Off my agony. The night she told me about the exhibition, she said it like a confession, soft and sweet. Liam, I've been working on something. I think you'll be proud. I looked her dead in the eyes. What is it? Her gaze softened. It's a series, an art show, about loss, about how people survive grief. I tilted my head. And I'm the inspiration? Her eyes sparkled. You're everything. And I almost laughed. Because she still thought I didn't know. But I knew. And now, I had a decision to make. I could walk away. Let her exploit me, rise from my bones, become something powerful and untouchable. Or, I could become the monster she thought I was too broken to be. I started writing letters. Not the kind people read at weddings or funerals. The kind no one sees until it's far too late. One was for her. One was for Ethan. One was for the gallery. Each one precise. Sharp. Like a scalpel across skin. I gathered copies of everything, photos, videos, the recordings from her laptop, the footage of Ethan mocking me. I built a folder titled Exhibit A. And then I made my move. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I didn't give her the chaos she'd expected, the breakdown she could capture in high resolution, the second act of her personal tragedy play. No, that's what she would have wanted. More footage. More tears. More of the beautiful suffering she could immortalize in galleries. So instead, I smiled. I wore her favorite shirt, made her coffee just the way she liked it, cinnamon dusted over oat milk foam, and kissed her forehead like nothing was broken. She was a sculptor, shaping pain. But I was about to become the fire that melted marble. It started with Ethan. I tracked his habits down to the hour. He worked in design now, freelance mostly. But he loved his Friday night routines, craft whiskey bars, rooftop gatherings, models with too much blush and too little sense. He craved being seen. Even in Betrayal, he needed an audience. I followed him. Not physically, digitally. He had left his social media unguarded. An open window into the mind of a man who thought he was untouchable. He posted a story one night. A drunken shot of a private party. I recognized the space. It was a gallery called the Ivory Frame, where Aria's exhibit would debut. The caption: 1 week until the genius unveils her masterpiece. Hope the muse shows up, LOL. LOL. He laughed. At me. At my pain. At what he helped make behind my back. That's when I knew. The revenge couldn't just be private. It had to be loud. Not fire and screaming, but exposure. Truth. Cold. Precise. Public. I wanted them to rot under the weight of their own masks. I contacted an old friend, Zoe. We weren't close anymore, not since university, but Zoe was a documentary filmmaker. She'd once told me, "Give me something real, something ugly, and I'll make the world stare." So I gave her everything. The laptop files. The hidden recordings. The exhibit press release. The audio of Aria and Ethan discussing how easily I broke down. The footage of my panic attacks she'd secretly recorded. I gave Zoe full access. And then I said just one thing. Make the world stare. Zoe didn't hesitate. She said, "We'll call it The Artist and Her Subject, a real study in cruelty." While she worked, I began preparing the next act. Arya kept telling me how nervous she was about opening night. "I'm afraid people won't get it," she said one evening, laying her head on my shoulder. I stroked her hair. "They'll get it," I whispered. "They'll get exactly what you want them to see." She smiled like a child. She still thought I was hers. In truth, I was already gone. That night, while she slept, I sent anonymous packages to 3 art critics. I included the footage from her laptop, Ethan's laughing confession, my own written statement detailing the emotional abuse. I signed it as Liam, the subject. Days passed. She didn't notice the tension online. The critics didn't post publicly, not yet. But the gallery curator did call her in. She came home shaken. "They want to delay the opening," she said. "Something about ethics. Copyright concerns. Someone spreading lies." "Lies?" I asked gently. She frowned. "I don't know. Someone must be jealous." I fought back a laugh. Because the world was already shifting beneath her feet, and she still thought she stood on a pedestal. I let her unravel. 2 days before the opening, Zoe released the documentary online. It was brutal, elegant, cold. It opened with my face, not broken, not crying, but steady. "My name is Liam, and I was used." The documentary pulled no punches. It exposed everything: her manipulation, her recordings, her seduction masked as care. It highlighted how she built an entire career off my trauma, how she shaped my breakdowns into performance art, how she paraded me as a symbol of fragility, while cheating, recording, and profiting from my lowest moments. Arya's voice echoed throughout. Her own words. Zoe used her against herself. Critics turned. The gallery dropped her. Sponsors vanished. And then came the interviews. News outlets, podcasts, art columns. Everyone wanted to talk to the subject. I gave only one interview. I sat in a studio under soft lights and looked directly into the camera. "I loved her," I said plainly. "I believed she was healing me. But she was documenting me like I was a dying animal. She wanted the end to be beautiful. But I survived. And now, she doesn't get to own my pain anymore." The video went viral. The exhibit was canceled. Her name, once rising in the art world, was now tied to exploitation. The gallery issued a public apology. And Ethan? He tried to defend her in a podcast. It only made things worse. Screenshots flooded in. Videos. People who'd seen them together. A trail of manipulation spanning years. A pattern. They weren't unique. They were repeat offenders. Arya tried to reach me. She stood outside my door once, sobbing. "You destroyed me," she screamed. Her mascara ran down her cheeks. She looked like her art now, tragic, hollow, bleeding. I opened the door just slightly. "I just held up a mirror," I said quietly. "You destroyed yourself." And then I closed it. The storm passed. Or at least, it moved on, leaving behind the wreckage of everything she had built with stolen pieces of me. Arya disappeared for a while after that. No more gallery appearances. No more interviews. She deleted her social media. Ethan went dark too, probably hiding in the shadows of someone else's tragedy by now, waiting to feed again. But me? I breathed. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the air inside my chest like it belonged to me. No more cameras. No more pretending. Just silence. Clean, undistorted. But you have to understand something. This story doesn't end with me moving on. Not the way they tell you it should. You don't move on from someone carving your soul into pieces and calling it art. You don't heal from being turned into a display. No. You change. You become something else. Months later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. Unmarked envelope. No return address. I recognized her handwriting before I even opened it. The paper smelled like lavender. Of course it did. Liam, I've spent weeks trying to find the right words. But nothing I say will undo what I did. I loved you. I did. Maybe not the way you needed, but I believed in us once. I believed in what we could be. I thought I was telling a story about grief, about survival. But now I see I was the villain in it. I lost everything. But the thing I miss most is you. Not your pain. Not your darkness. Just you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to know. I'm sorry. There was no threat. No plea for redemption. Just that one word. Sorry. I read the letter once. Then burned it. Weeks later, Zoe called. Her documentary had been nominated for an independent film award. She asked if I wanted to attend the screening. I declined. I'm not a symbol, I said. Not anymore. She paused. You were never a symbol. You were the warning. I kept the footage. All of it. Not out of spite, but to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. Because people like Arya, they don't just leave bruises. They leave confusion. They leave you questioning your memories, your instincts, your very reality. Sometimes the footage was the only thing that grounded me. I'd watch her smiling while I cried. Hear Ethan laughing in the background. And I'd whisper to myself, never again. One day, I walked past a gallery in another city, one I'd never been to before. A small piece caught my eye in the window. An abstract sketch. Charcoal. It looked like a man trying to hold his own heart in. The placard beneath it said, Untitled. Artist unknown. And I stood there for a long time. Not because it reminded me of my pain, but because it didn't. It reminded me of possibility. That maybe, one day, I would draw again. Not for her. Not for anyone. But for me. People still recognize me sometimes. Not often. But enough. They say, you're the guy from The Artist and Her Subject, right? I smile politely. Nod. But I don't tell them the whole story. Because the truth is, they only saw a sliver of it. They saw the knife. They didn't feel it twist. They heard my words, but they didn't hear my silence. They didn't hear the moment I stopped crying and started planning. They didn't see the boy who gave everything and was turned into a warning label. I visited my mother's grave last week. Told her everything. About Arya. About Ethan. About the fall and the rise and the long, cold silence in between. I left a charcoal sketch at her headstone. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt to put something on paper again. They say forgiveness is freedom. Maybe. But sometimes, revenge is clarity. Not rage. Not fire. Just light. Shining truth on the ones who thought they could twist darkness into profit. Arya tried to immortalize me in tragedy. But I turned her into a footnote in her own story. Because in the end, she picked up my shattered pieces, looked into my eyes, and said she'd never let anyone hurt me again. But then she was the one who drove the knife in, smiling while I bled. And now? I smile too. But not because I'm healed. Because I survived. And she'll spend the rest of her life wondering how I learned to live without the parts she took.